Now, one of the most rewarding aspects of being the department chair is the pleasure of working with a remarkable and inspirational group of faculty who possess the supreme gift of great teaching. And in recognition of their great contributions to our department and to your education, it's our custom to feature a faculty speaker at each of our commencements. It's my true honor to introduce our faculty speaker for this year's commencement, a teacher loved and admired by many of her students, Professor Jenny Sharpe. Jenny is Professor of English, Comparative Literature, and Gender Studies, and also serves as Associate Dean of Inclusive Excellence for the Humanities. She joined UCLA's Department of English in 1993 after teaching at Boston College for 6 years. She's published widely on Caribbean and Black Atlantic literature and culture, histories of empire and slavery, and theories of diaspora. And Professor Sharpe is about to embark on a new journey into retirement, so please join me in both welcoming and congratulating her. Jenny.
Hello, class of 2025, and greetings to all of your friends and family who are, tolerating this heat to help us celebrate your great achievements. I'm truly honored to have been asked to speak to you today. If you were to have told the younger version of myself that I would be standing here as a faculty commencement speaker, she would have laughed at the idea as a fantastic story. Growing up in Mumbai, then known as Bombay, I longed to attend an American college to study literature, but had no idea how to go about doing it. Since no one in my family had attended college, my father would respond to my expressed desire with the question, "Well, what can you do with an English degree?" I had no answer for him. Still, I daydreamed about traveling to America for further studies, and even foolishly wrote to pen pals I found on the back pages of a comic book, just in case I needed a contact when I arrived. The path to achieving my goal was much longer and more circuitous than simply wishing it would be so. The 1971 Indo-Pakistani War prompted my parents to move to Beirut, a beautiful and vibrant city on the Mediterranean coast. But with the outbreak of the Lebanese Civil War a few years later, it wasn't long before I was on the move again, this time without my parents. After a brief stay in London to obtain a visa, I landed in New York, my port of entry as an immigrant to the US. Woohoo! The immediate task at hand was to earn a living. And so I accepted one thankless minimum wage job after another for several years until I told myself no more. It was time to pursue my adolescent dream. I was pleasantly surprised to be accepted into the honors program at the University of Texas at Austin. Here we go, my colors, which in its pre-tech days was known as the cheapest city in the US. Ideal for this first-generation Pell Grant student. Although my short-term goal was to become a school teacher, I so enjoyed the challenge of learning that I just kept going until I reached the end of the line, which was a Ph.D. I did not necessarily plan to become a professor, but here I am standing before you after having been one for 38 years. So, you just never know. What is it about literature that so enthralled me? It was, and continues to be, the power of the story, performance, or poem to transform how we see the world, and in doing so, to activate within us a new way of being in the world. The Bombay-born British-American writer Salman Rushdie recalls that his very first literary influence was the 1939 Hollywood classic, The Wizard of Oz, which he saw in a Bombay movie theater when he was 10 years old. He calls it the film his first literary influence because it inspired him to write a Bollywood version of its story. I, too, was deeply affected by that same film, which, like Rushdie, I saw at age 10 in a Bombay theater, but several years later. The beauty of classics is that their experience can be repeated generation after generation after generation, if not exactly in the same way. At the initial theatrical release of The Wizard of Oz, people who had never seen a movie in color gasped and sobbed when Dorothy stepped out of her monochromatic life into the glorious Technicolor of Oz, which is more startling in the immersive experience of a theater than on television, which is probably how most of you have seen the film. At first, only a tiny patch of color is visible as Dorothy and the audience with her peers through the crack of the open door of her house. Then the crack widens until the color, what Rushdie calls bold, expressionist splashes, fills the entire screen. As Dorothy steps over the threshold of her house into Oz, she is no longer in sepia tone, but full living color. I find that scene to be a perfect visual metaphor for the transformative power of literature, and indeed, your education as an English major. The shock of the new, the strange, and the fantastic are not necessarily 20th century phenomena. Audiences and readers encountered it in works like Shakespeare's The Tempest, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, whose monstrous protagonists counterintuitively possess a deep appreciation of beauty and speak the most lyrical and eloquent prose, so much so that they cannot be simply regarded as subhuman creatures. Rushdie insists on the necessity for books, and I'm quoting him, books that draw new and better maps of reality and make new languages with which we can understand the world. It is this lesson you will carry with you into the world. Based on my experience as an educator, I believe that a college education provides the solid foundation for the person you have or will become. You may have already discovered your particular talent, found your self-confidence, or formed close friendships that will nurture you for years to come. You, our students, have answered my father's question of what one can do with an English degree. Your degree is the portal to a multitude of paths, both ones that are well-trodden and those that are new. With each year's graduation, I witness the places our English majors go, and it is clear that there is no single or preferred track. This year, I see potential careers in journalism, law, health, social work, business, publishing, teaching, music, media, and the entertainment industry. Some of you will be interning, others pursuing graduate degrees, and still others taking time to figure things out, which are all viable options. Today's workplace is changing so rapidly that we don't know what opportunities will exist in 1, 2, or even 5 years. The skills you have learned and knowledge you have gained during your time at UCLA offer flexibility and adaptability to a changing world. The only advice I have based on my unconventional path of having worked an array of jobs before starting college is to choose work you enjoy, because you will be spending a good part of your life doing it. Have your feet firmly planted on solid ground, but also don't be afraid to spread your wings and fly, as you never know where they might take you. Congratulations, class of 2025.
Thank you, Jenny. In addition to our faculty speaker, it's our custom also to have a speaker chosen from among our alumni. One of you will end up on this stage some years hence. And it's often a process of, it's kind of an amazing process to choose the alumni speaker, because I talk to colleagues and we get all kinds of memories about remarkable students from years past. This year's student was recalled by one of my colleagues from a class on Milton many, I won't say how many years ago. And he, as one of the most amazing students that my colleague had encountered in her entire long and distinguished career. And so this year, it's my pleasure to welcome Kwame Granderson. As a real estate attorney, Mr. Granderson has represented Fortune 500 clients in commercial real estate transactions, including the Capital Company of America, which was involved in financing the acquisition of Fox Plaza and Century City. He's worked as a consultant to large financial firms in connection with the underwriting of development projects, including shopping centers, hotels, and high-rise condo projects. Currently, he's a founder and managing partner of MHC Capital, LLC, which owns and operates 28 manufactured housing communities in the Midwest with over 4,000 sites worth in excess of $250 million. He also owns the property management company and a property management company and construction company. Committed to giving back to his community, Mr. Granderson has funded a scholarship program for inner-city students. Mr. Granderson earned his J.D. from Harvard Law School, cum laude, and a bachelor's degree in English, just like you, from UCLA, summa cum laude. He's the author also of Right to the Top. Please join me welcoming this year's distinguished alumni speaker, Kwame Granderson.
Yeah, so I had no idea when I graduated that I would end up back up here speaking in front of you today. So I wish someone had told me at the time. I might have been better prepared. I'd like to first thank the department chair, Saree Makdisi, and the distinguished professor, Deborah Sugar, for allowing me to speak today. And I'd just like to say that this is a wonderful honor for me, and it's frankly unexpected. At lunch earlier today, I found out that the entire time I was preparing for this speech, I was pronouncing both of their names wrong. And so I'm very grateful that we had a chance to meet each other in person and get that cleared up. Let me begin by recounting a life-altering experience I had about 15 years ago. So I've spoken around the country on essentially two topics. One is asset protection, because that's what I focused on at Harvard Law School. And the other is the wealth building mindset, because a lot of people want to know how I started off with no money and no credit and acquired so much real estate. So I just completed this presentation on the wealth building mindset to a packed convention hall, and I get this 3-minute standing ovation. And I'm sitting outside of the convention hall, still kind of riding the high of this presentation. And a large bearded gentleman walks up to me, and he's wearing a plaid shirt and jeans, and he pulls up a chair and he says, "You know, I just heard your presentation, and I come from a small town down south." And he said, "You know, the truth is, you and I would normally never be sitting across from each other like this. We would just never be in the same environment." And so I kind of straightened up on the bench, feeling a little bit uncomfortable. And he says, life sure is funny. You just never really can quite figure it. And so I really didn't know what to say. So I finally said, did something happen? And he says to me, "Well, I've got a wife and 2 small children, and I was going to go up to my hotel room later on this evening and take my life." And his eyes started welling up with tears, and my heart sort of sank, and then he stood up, so I stood up, and he says, "But you, sir, you gave me the strength to go back home to my family." And I'm sitting there sort of stunned and speechless, and he goes, "Yeah, you did that for me, sir, and I can't never repay you for that." He said, our paths might never cross again, but, I just wanted to come up here and shake your hand and thank you for that. And he nodded and he walked off. And I sat there sort of immobilized and watched him walk off, and I kind of loosened my tie because I was struggling to breathe. And I reflected on that experience for months, probably. And at the end of that reflection, I sort of concluded that, it's really only when we get off of our individual islands and cross the bridge of humanity can we really change the world. So in order to flesh out that statement, let me go back to when I first arrived at UCLA. UCLA is such a pretty campus that as a first-generation college student, I didn't really feel like I belonged. I mean, have you ever like just stood on the lawn between Rolfe Hall and Powell Library and just kind of looked around? You're basically in the middle of a Romanesque revival. I mean, you've got bell towers and rounded arches and blind arcades framed by decorative pilasters, and it's almost like you need a day pass to just walk into one of those buildings. And so I was lost and felt completely overwhelmed, and I scheduled an appointment to meet with my counselor. And in that meeting, we kind of uncovered that my real passion was real estate, and that going to law school might help me prepare for that career because it would help me learn how to protect the assets that I wanted to amass. And then from there, we kind of figured that, the English major would be a good major, a good preparation to go to law school. Problem was, I had absolutely no confidence at all in my writing ability, and I had just gotten a C on my first English paper. So I leave the counselor, I go over to Powell, I sit in one of those comfy chairs. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, there is no way that I succeed at this place. I don't even fully understand really what's expected of me here. And then out of nowhere, I had an epiphany, and it was one of these things where, it just seems so obvious that you're kind of wondering if you missed something, right? And here was the thought that I had. The one person that got an A in every class that I was about to take for the next 4 years was the professor teaching that class, right? So I asked the librarian, I said, do professors ever write essays? And the librarian said, yes. And I said, are they available? And she said, yeah, they're publicly available and they're free. And I said, wait, what? So I can just get these essays for free, as many as I want? Yeah. So the person grading my paper has written an essay on the same topic that I'm about to write for, and I can get these just anytime I want. So, once I figured that out, I started reading their essays. And I wrote down the words that they were using over and over again. And I mimicked the rhythm of their writing and the way that they structured their sentences, the rhetorical devices that they were using to underscore the important points that they were trying to make. And slowly, I began to realize that one of the most important classes that I could take at UCLA wasn't being offered on the curriculum. It was the art of powerful expression. It was what I was absorbing from these incredibly well-written essays. So I studied these essays after hours, night after night, in empty classrooms. And as my skills developed, my confidence grew, and my writing improved by quantum leaps. The result? I took 32 classes at UCLA. I got an A in every class, and I won the Outstanding Senior Award. But en route to these accomplishments, something even more unlikely happened, and that was I received a paper back from Professor Richard Lanham in an upper division Shakespeare class, on which he wrote, "This is a brilliant paper, original at every turn. I'd never really been able to see it this clearly before." Now, if you'd ever met Professor Richard Lanham, you'd understand how incredible of a statement that is to get back on your paper. And so as a first-generation college student, I'd helped an iconic Shakespeare professor revisit his understanding of a text that he had read 1,000 times. That was the moment that I realized I had acquired a superpower that could help people rethink entrenched positions, that could help people regain lost confidence and maybe restore dreams deferred. That was the moment I decided to cross the bridge of humanity and share some of the things I had learned and developed with some of the other students in my classes. In fact, I discovered at lunch today that part of the reason I'm here today is because I guess I was so enthusiastically helping the other students in my upper division Milton class that all the grades across the board started just, everybody started rising in their performance in the class because I was so enthusiastically trying to help everybody. I didn't realize I was quite that enthusiastic at the time, but it turns out I was. So that came from, this experience that I was having with my own confidence growing as a student. And so I took these techniques with me to Harvard Law School. And I used them to write my final thesis paper on the evolution of limited liability companies. I was incredibly proud. But my pride was short-lived, however, because the professor responsible for grading my thesis took the position that the paper could not have been written by someone like me. For months, she and her team scoured the legal journals trying to figure out what the source of my argument was. And after months of waiting for the verdict, I received a letter from her conceding that it was my original work, awarding me an A+, and recommending that I publish the paper in the premier business law journal of the time. I should have been elated. My techniques had been vindicated at the highest level, but I was absolutely demoralized. For months, I thought I was going to be expelled, and everything I'd worked for would be destroyed. I thought maybe I was the wrong superhero to be wielding this superpower. So I rejected the offer to publish my paper, and I decided to go back to my original plan, which was graduate, make money, and help lift my family out of financial uncertainty. So while I was working as a lawyer in downtown Los Angeles, I started researching the local real estate market. And after extensive research, I arrived at the following relatively simple insight. It turns out that prejudice is profitable. In 1998, I realized that apartment buildings in South Central were being systematically undervalued because of the population living there. And my argument was that despite the perception of South LA, the cash flows used to determine the value of income-producing real estate has no prejudice. But I discovered quickly that becoming a real estate investor is challenging when you have no money and no credit. It's kind of like sort of this idea that it takes money to make money. It kind of felt like a cosmic injustice to me. It was like a cruel game of chicken or egg. But then it occurred to me that I did have an asset. I had an asset that was more powerful than money or good credit. I still had the asset that I had developed at UCLA. And more importantly, I decided that despite my experience at Harvard, the only person that really needed to believe in me was me. So I wrote an essay known as a business plan, explaining my research and inviting investors to join me in acquiring apartment buildings in South LA. We started buying apartment buildings, and within 5 years, the values skyrocketed. In 2010, I speculated that mobile home parks were also being systematically undervalued because of the stigma associated with trailer park living. So I wrote another essay, known as a white paper, arguing that Wall Street will eventually figure out that this asset class is consistently outperforming every other asset class in real estate, despite the negative perception of mobile home parks. Well, mobile home parks are now one of the most coveted assets of institutional investors, and I've had the good fortune of becoming one of the largest owner-operators of mobile home parks in the country. So if you reflect on the real estate career I just shared, you might understand why I chuckle when I hear people say that humanity majors have no value. Most of the opportunities that will change your life begin with some form of writing. Whether it's a personal statement, a grant proposal, or a business plan, the skills that you just spent the last 4 to 5 years acquiring are not just esoteric throwaways. They are the skills of self-advocacy and agency, but they require that you fully honor and appreciate your value. Only then can you write your future in your own words. And only when you are the author of your destiny can you move the world. I want to thank you for the honor of addressing you here today on this special occasion, and I would like to congratulate you so much on your achievement here today. Thank you so much.